Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to explore a concept that, honestly, might just completely dismantle your intuitive understanding of reality. I mean, we all feel it, right? The steady, unstoppable march of seconds, minutes, hours. But what if I told you that this entire sensation is literally manufactured? It's wild, but we're going to see how time is generated locally by the wetware of our own brains and universally by the absolute mind-bending mechanics of quantum entanglement. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's just dive right into this massive question that has baffled philosophers and physicists alike for centuries. Does time actually exist? Is this unidirectional ticking clock that we feel every single second fundamentally real? Or is it just one giant, elaborate illusion? It's a heavy concept, I know, but we're going to break it all down using the absolute latest research from neuroscience and quantum physics. To set the tone for our journey here, consider this quote. Remember in the final moments of Avengers Infinity War, when Thanos reverses the passage of time to seize the Mind Stone? He says, "This is no time to die. Now is no time at all." Now, what's really astonishing here isn't the whole movie magic aspect. It's that modern quantum physics suggests Thanos was actually scientifically accurate. Now might genuinely be, well, no time at all. Crazy, right? Well, this brings us to the biological clock and how time is actually constructed right inside the brain. Think about, say, hitting a tennis ball. How does a player perfectly time their swing to meet a ball hurtling toward them at 100 miles an hour? We naturally tend to think we're just reacting to some universal clock ticking out there in the world. But let's look at the biological mechanisms that literally manufacture this illusion of a timeline inside our own heads. A recent study in PLOS Biology mapped out this exact step-by-step chronological journey of how our temporal processing actually happens. It's fascinating. When you look at that approaching tennis ball, the visual centers at the back of your brain, the occipital cortex, first encode the physical duration with gradual neural responses. So basically, the longer the stimulus, the stronger the response. Then, middle brain regions step in to transform this into a selective readout, where specific neurons respond to specific durations. And finally, your higher-order frontal regions take all that data and categorize it into your subjective experience of time passing. And this whole process brilliantly illustrates a key point. Time is not an external force we simply perceive, like light or sound. It's not a single sense. It's a highly complex constructed outcome, heavily manufactured step by step by our own neural networks. Your brain is essentially taking raw, timeless sensory data and editing it together into a chronological movie, just so you can make sense of and navigate the world. But here's where we hit a massive roadblock, a real physics discrepancy, a universe divided. Because if time is largely just a biological construction in our heads, how does physics handle it? Well, the truth is, this illusion of time is currently the exact thing preventing physicists from establishing a unified theory of everything. See, we have two incredibly successful frameworks for understanding the universe, but they fundamentally completely disagree on what time actually is. On one hand, quantum mechanics relies on this fixed, external, ticking clock that just flows unidirectionally from the past straight to the present. But on the other hand, Einstein's general relativity proved that time isn't fixed at all. It's this flexible fabric deeply intertwined with space, and it can literally be warped and stretched by gravity and high speeds. So this glaring contradiction forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question about the very fabric of our cosmos. If our brains are doing all the heavy lifting biologically to create our perception of duration, and our two absolute best physics models can't even agree on a basic definition, well, what is actually ticking out there in the universe? Get ready for this. The quantum solution is that time is simply a byproduct. We find this awe-inspiring answer by doing something radical, completely dropping the assumption that time is a fundamental feature of the universe. Just throwing it out. What if time isn't a foundational pillar of reality at all, but merely a side effect of something else entirely? To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the Page and Wooders mechanism. Proposed way back in 1983, this theory suggests that time is an emergent property. It basically argues that time is born out of the mysterious, spooky connection between distant particles, which we call quantum entanglement. In this view, an object only experiences time because it is entangled with another object that is acting as a clock. Fast forward to a recent study published in the journal Physical Review A by physicist Alessandro Copo, who actually put this to the test. His team took two entangled but non-interacting theoretical states, a vibrating harmonic oscillator and a set of tiny magnets acting as a clock. And astonishingly, they found their entire system could be perfectly described by the famous Schrödinger equation. But here's the kicker. Instead of the equation running on time, it ran according to the states of those tiny magnets. And it gets even better. When they scaled these objects up, the equations simplified perfectly right into classical physics. They proved mathematically that time's flow results entirely from entanglement, even on a macro scale. That is a real game changer. Just think about the implications of that for a second. This means that without these quantum correlations, time simply does not exist. Period. If you were to somehow look at the universe as a completely unentangled system from the outside, it would appear as a static, timeless block where nothing ever fundamentally changes. This incredible revelation brings us so much closer toward a true grand unification in physics, a world without time. By accepting that time isn't some base ingredient baked into reality, we can actually start to stitch together quantum mechanics and general relativity. It completely forces us to rethink the universe without relying on space and time as these rigid, unbending containers. Now, this definitely wasn't an overnight discovery. Tracing it back from the ancient Greek philosopher Leucippus, who founded the atomist school way back around 450 BCE, all the way to modern physicists, the scientific realization that space-time is purely quantum has literally been centuries in the making. We've moved all the way from proposing mechanisms in the 80s to finally mathematically proving them in 2024.
And the human side of this realization is just as fascinating. In his best-selling book, Reality is Not What It Seems, theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli shares how he actually conceptualized this entire idea during a long, solitary drive from Italy to France in 2012. He realized that to successfully explain quantum gravity, space has to be made of quanta, and time fundamentally just does not exist. Imagine having that epiphany on a road trip. And that brings us to this incredibly heavy quote from Alessandro Copo, which completely shatters that classical illusion we started with today. He says, "The correlation between the clock and the system leads to the emergence of time, a fundamental aspect of our lives. The passing of time isn't some universal river carrying us forward. It is just a correlation between entangled objects. That feeling of a ticking clock? It's a localized experience, born from quantum connections and carefully edited together by your brain's cortex."
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a seriously mind-bending thought to chew on. Your brain has physically mapped out a past, a present, and a future so you can play tennis, drive a car, and just live your everyday life. But fundamentally, at the absolute base level of the universe, that timeline is an illusion born from quantum entanglement. So if time isn't actually real, when exactly are you? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning reality.